Bullies mock the quiet kid until his hidden talent leaves them speechless. The fluorescent lights of Westridge High School buzzed overhead as 15-year-old Elliot Chen kept his eyes fixed on the beige linoleum floor. 6 weeks at this new school, and he'd already mastered the art of invisibility, or so he thought. His slightly rounded shoulders hunched forward beneath his oversized hoodie, and his hands clutched the straps of his backpack as if they were lifelines. At 5'6", and with a soft, unassuming build, Elliot had always been an easy target. The glasses perched on his nose completed the stereotype that seemed to follow him from school to school. Just make it to Mr. Patterson's class, Elliot thought. 3 more hallways. Don't make eye contact. Don't exist. But existence at Westridge wasn't something you could opt out of, not when you were on Damon Fisher's radar. Well, look who it is, the booming voice echoed down the hallway, causing nearby conversations to falter. Damon, the junior varsity quarterback with shoulders like boulders and a smirk that never seemed to fade, stepped directly into Elliot's path. At 17, he ruled the school's social hierarchy with a combination of athletic prowess and calculated cruelty. It's our little exchange student. Hey Chen, did you bring your calculator today? I've got some math homework. Beside him, Tyler. Reese snickered, Damon's ever-present shadow, taller and lankier, but equally committed to the cause of making Elliot's life miserable. Completing their trio was Marcus Webb, built like a defensive lineman with a buzz cut and perpetually crossed arms. I'm not an exchange student, Elliot muttered, the same correction he'd made repeatedly since his first day. I was born in Pittsburgh. What was that? Damon cupped his ear theatrically. Sorry, I don't speak whatever that was. The gathering crowd of students maintained a safe distance, some averting their eyes, others watching with morbid curiosity. Ms. Winters, the English teacher, glanced in their direction from her classroom doorway, but quickly retreated inside. Nobody intervened at Westridge. That was the unspoken rule when it came to Damon and his crew. I need to get to class, Elliot said, attempting to sidestep the wall of teenage muscle blocking his path. Damon's hand shot out, catching Elliot's shoulder with enough force to spin him against the lockers. Your class isn't going anywhere, but your backpack, that looks heavy. Let me help you with that. Before Elliot could react, Tyler had yanked the backpack from his shoulders, unzipping it and upending its contents onto the floor. Notebooks, textbooks, pencils, and a carefully wrapped lunch tumbled out, scattering across the hallway. A student stepped back to avoid the debris. Oops! Damon's fake concern dripped with sarcasm. You should be more careful with your stuff, Chen. Elliot knelt down, gathering his belongings while keeping his eyes down. His fingers trembled slightly as he collected his physics notebook, now sporting a fresh footprint on its cover. Don't react. Don't give them the satisfaction. This isn't the time or place. The warning voice in his head, which sounded suspiciously like his grandfather's, kept his breathing measured and his face carefully blank. 6 schools in 3 years had taught Elliot the consequences of losing control, and his grandfather had taught him something far more important: when to use his true abilities. What's this? Marcus had snatched up a small, worn photograph that had fallen from between the pages of Elliot's notebook. It showed an elderly Asian man in loose-fitting clothes, standing in a traditional stance. Is this your daddy? What's he doing, some kind of kung fu pose? He waved the photo mockingly. For the first time, Elliot's composure cracked. Give that back. His voice was quiet but carried an edge that wasn't there before. Or what? Marcus laughed, holding the photo higher. You gonna karate chop me? Elliot rose slowly, his eyes finally meeting Marcus's. For a brief moment, something flickered in those normally passive eyes, something that made Marcus take a half step back before he caught himself. The bell rang, shattering the moment. Damon grabbed the photo from Marcus and flicked it at Elliot's face. See you at lunch, math wizard, Damon called over his shoulder as the 3 bullies sauntered away, high-fiving each other. Elliot carefully retrieved the photograph, gently smoothing its creased corner before tucking it safely into his pocket. It was the only picture he had of his grandfather, Ye, taken during his final championship in Hong Kong, before he'd moved to America to raise Elliot after his parents' accident. Not yet, Elliot reminded himself. Patience and discipline. Choose your battlefield. By lunchtime, Elliot had almost convinced himself that he could eat quickly in a bathroom stall and avoid another confrontation. But the memory of his grandfather's voice was stronger. Never hide to eat. It diminishes your spirit. So he sat at the far end of a cafeteria table, methodically consuming the dumplings his grandfather had prepared that morning. He was nearly finished when a shadow fell across his lunch tray. Those look weird, Damon commented. sliding onto the bench across from Elliot, flanked by Tyler and Marcus. "What is that, dog meat?" Elliot continued eating, not raising his eyes. "I'm talking to you," Damon snapped, reaching across to flip Elliot's tray. The remaining dumplings and sauce container went flying, splattering across Elliot's shirt and the floor. "Hey, Chen can fly his food just like in those kung fu movies," Tyler hooted, drawing attention from nearby tables. Elliot absorbed the shock silently, using a napkin to dab at the worst of the stains on his shirt while around him, laughter spread like ripples in a pond. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" Damon leaned forward. "Or maybe you're just too stupid to speak English properly." "My English is probably better than yours," Elliot replied quietly. "I got a 750 on the verbal section of the practice SAT last year." The cafeteria went quiet as Damon's face darkened. "Did you just call me stupid?" "No," Elliot said evenly. "I simply stated a fact about my test scores." Damon stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the linoleum. "Outside, now." "I'd rather not," Elliot responded, returning to cleaning his shirt. "It wasn't a request," Damon growled, grabbing Elliot's collar and hauling him to his feet. "You need a lesson in respect." The next few minutes passed in a blur as Elliot was marched through the cafeteria doors and out to the school's rear courtyard, a concrete space dotted with unused picnic tables. A crowd quickly formed a circle around them, the anticipation of violence drawing students like moths to a flame. "I don't want to fight you," Elliot stated, standing with his arms at his sides. "Good, then this will be easy," Damon sneered, shoving Elliot hard enough to make him stumble. "Fight back, you coward!" Elliot regained his balance but made no move to retaliate. Instead, he assumed a neutral stance, feet shoulder-width apart, hands open at his sides, posture erect but relaxed. To the onlookers, it might have appeared that he was simply standing there, but any trained eye would have recognized the perfect balance, the subtle weight distribution that prepared him for movement in any direction. "Look at him. He's too scared to even raise his hands," Marcus jeered from the edge of the circle. Damon circled Elliot like a predator, throwing a few feints that Elliot simply leaned away from, barely moving his feet. The lack of reaction seemed to infuriate Damon further. "Fight back!" Damon demanded, throwing a real punch aimed at Elliot's stomach. What happened next occurred so quickly that many spectators would later disagree on the details. Elliot's hand moved in a small, circular motion, guiding Damon's punch harmlessly past his body. While simultaneously stepping to the side, the momentum carried Damon forward off balance, and a light touch from Elliot's other hand on his back sent him sprawling face first onto the concrete. The crowd gasped. Damon pushed himself up, his face flushed with embarrassment and rage. "You're dead," he growled, charging at Elliot with both arms extended for a tackle. This time there was no mistaking what happened. Elliot pivoted smoothly, his hands capturing Damon's right arm at the wrist and elbow. A subtle shift of Elliot's weight, a gentle redirection of force, and suddenly Damon was airborne, flipping over Elliot's hip before landing hard on his back, the impact knocking the wind from his lungs. The courtyard fell silent except for Damon's desperate attempts to refill his lungs. What the hell was that? Tyler broke the silence, his voice higher than usual. Elliot resumed his neutral stance, calm as still water. "Wing Chun, my grandfather is Sifu Chen Wei Ting." The name meant nothing to most of the students watching, but a few, including a wide-eyed girl at the edge of the circle, reacted with shock. "The Dragon of Hong Kong," she exclaimed. "The 5-time international champion?" Elliot nodded once, his eyes never leaving Damon, who had finally managed to sit up, gulping air. "Your grandfather is that Chen?" The question came from Mr. Harmon, the physical education teacher who had pushed through the crowd. Unlike the other teachers who turned a blind eye, Mr. Harmon had been a college wrestler and retained both the build and the mentality. "I've seen his demonstrations. Incredible control." "You knew about this?" Marcus accused, pointing at Elliot. "Are you new and you let us think he was just some nerd?" Elliot finally allowed himself a small smile. "You never asked, and my grandfather taught me that true skill doesn't need to be advertised. He attacked me." Damon had found his voice, if not his dignity, pointing accusingly at Elliot from his seated position on the ground. Mr. Harmon raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because I've been standing here for the past minute, and all I saw was you charging at him while he defended himself without throwing a single punch." He turned to the crowd. "Show's over. Everyone back inside. Fisher, principal's office. You, too, Chen." As the crowd dispersed, whispers and glances following Elliot, Tyler and Marcus helped Damon to his feet, keeping a wary distance from Elliot as they passed. "This isn't over," Damon muttered, but the threat sounded hollow, undermined by the way he winced with each step. The incident in the courtyard might have been enough to change Elliot's status at Westridge, but what happened 3 days later in the gymnasium cemented it. During a mandatory assembly, Principal Gleason was droning on about upcoming standardized tests when the unmistakable sound of a phone alarm cut through the speech. Students shifted in their seats, looking around for the source of the interruption. Red-faced, Elliot fumbled with his pocket, trying to silence his phone. "Mr. Chen," Principal Gleason's voice boomed over the microphone, "since you apparently have somewhere more important to be, perhaps you'd like to share with everyone?" Caught in the spotlight, Elliot stood reluctantly. "I'm sorry, sir, it's just my training alarm. I usually practice at this time." "Practice what exactly?" The principal's tone made it clear he expected an answer that would justify the disruption. Elliot hesitated, looking around at the sea of curious faces. Wing Chun. It's a martial art. From several rows back, Damon's voice rang out. "Why don't you show us, Chen, since you interrupted everyone?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the student body, and even some teachers nodded, curious after hearing rumors about the confrontation. Principal Gleason, sensing an opportunity to turn a disruption into an educational moment, gestured to the open space in front of the bleachers. "Well, Mr. Chen, a brief demonstration might be educational for everyone." Trapped, Elliot made his way down from the bleachers to the open floor space. He stood awkwardly for a moment, then closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When his eyes opened again, something had changed in his demeanor. Without a word, he began a series of movements, the first form of Wing Chun known as Xiao Lim Tao or Little Idea. His hands moved in precise, flowing patterns, while his stance remained rooted and solid. Each movement was executed with such clarity and purpose that the gym fell completely silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on the transformation occurring before them. The shy, awkward boy had vanished, replaced by a practitioner of such evident skill that even those who understood nothing about martial arts could recognize they were witnessing something extraordinary. The economy of motion, the perfect balance, the absolute focus, it was mesmerizing. When Elliot completed the form, he remained motionless for a moment, then bowed slightly and turned to return to his seat. "Wait," Principal Gleason called, clearly impressed. "Is there more you could show us?" Elliot paused. "I could demonstrate some applications, but I'd need a partner." All eyes turned expectantly to Damon, who shrank back in his seat. Surprisingly, it was Mr. Harmon who stepped forward. "I studied judo in college. Would that work?" Elliot nodded, a spark of genuine enthusiasm breaking through his reserve for the first time. What followed was 10 minutes of controlled demonstrations that left the entire school speechless. Mr. Harmon, despite his size advantage and athletic background, found himself repeatedly neutralized by Elliot's efficient techniques, redirected, unbalanced, and controlled without ever being hurt or humiliated. "It's about using the opponent's energy against them," Elliot explained, as he guided Mr. Harmon's punch into empty air with a subtle shift. Size and strength matter less than structure and timing. By the time the demonstration ended, the assembly had run over schedule, but no one seemed to mind. Students who had never given Elliot a second glance were watching him with newfound respect, and more than a few with outright awe. As Elliot returned to his seat, he passed the section where Damon, Tyler, and Marcus sat. Damon looked away, but Tyler actually nodded slightly in acknowledgement. The following week brought a seismic shift in Elliot's life at Westridge. The hallways, once hostile territory, became pathways of curious greetings and respectful nods. Students who had previously ignored his existence now approached with questions about his training, his grandfather, and whether he might be willing to teach them. At lunch on Tuesday, as Elliot sat at his usual isolated table, a tray clattered down opposite him. It was Sophia Martinez, captain of the debate team and one of the few students who had occasionally smiled at him before the courtyard incident. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, already settling in. "I have questions." "About Wing Chun?" Elliot asked, growing accustomed to these inquiries. "About you," she corrected. "You've been here almost 2 months, keeping this massive talent hidden. Why?" Elliot considered the question as he took a bite of his lunch. "My grandfather taught me that skill without discipline is worthless. I'm not supposed to use Wing Chun to show off or to hurt people unnecessarily." But Damon was hurting. "You," Sophia pointed out, "you could have stopped him day one." "I was hoping I wouldn't have to," Elliot admitted. "Each new school I try to just blend in, not be a target." He shrugged. "It rarely works, but yeah, my grandfather says patience is as important as technique." Before Sophia could respond, A shadow fell across the table. Looking up, Elliot was surprised to see Tyler standing there, hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets. "Can I talk to you?" Tyler asked, glancing nervously at Sophia. "I'll give you 2 a minute," she said, though she moved only to the next table, clearly intending to observe. Tyler sat down, his usual confidence nowhere in evidence. "Look, I wanted to say I was a jerk. We all were." Elliot remained silent, waiting. "The thing is," Tyler continued, "Damon's been suspended for a week and his dad is furious because some college scouts were supposed to come to Friday's game." He picked at the edge of the table. "Marcus is still saying you got lucky, but I know what I saw." "What did you see?" Elliot asked quietly. Tyler met his eyes. "That you could have really hurt Damon if you wanted to, but you didn't. You just stopped him." He paused. "My dad's a Marine, and he always says the most dangerous guys are the ones who don't need to prove anything." Elliot nodded slowly, understanding the roundabout apology for what it was. "Anyway," Tyler stood up, "I just wanted to say that, and I was wondering if maybe you'd consider teaching some of that stuff. To me, I mean. I'd pay you." The request caught Elliot completely off guard. "I'm not a teacher," he protested. "My grandfather is the Sifu, but you know more than anyone." "Else here," Tyler insisted. "Just some basics. I'm sick of Damon always calling the shots, you know?" And with that simple admission, Elliot suddenly saw Tyler clearly, not just as Damon's shadow, but as someone trapped in a role he wasn't entirely comfortable with. "I can show you a few things," Elliot found himself saying. "But real Wing Chun takes years to master." Tyler's face lit up. "That's cool, I can come to your place after school, or the park by the library," Elliot suggested. "Tomorrow at 4. As Tyler walked away with a new bounce in his step, Sophia slid back into her seat, eyebrows raised. "That was unexpected. For me, too," Elliot admitted. "You're different than I thought," she said after a moment. "Everyone assumed you were just quiet because you were scared or something." "I was scared," Elliot said honestly. "Being the new kid always sucks, especially when you've been the new kid 6 times in 3 years." "Why so many moves?" Sophia asked. Elliot hesitated, then reached for his wallet, removing the worn photograph of his grandfather. "After my parents died, Yeye became my guardian. He came out of retirement to support us, teaching private students wherever he could find them. We go where the work is." Sophia studied the photograph. "He looks formidable." "He is," Elliot said with a smile. "But also the kindest person I know. He gave up everything in Hong Kong to raise me." The conversation shifted to other topics, and for the first time since arriving at Westridge, Elliot found himself genuinely engaging with a classmate, discovering common interests in physics and science fiction movies. When the lunch bell rang, Sophia stood to leave, then paused. "There's a group of us who study together at the library on Thursdays. You should join us." "Maybe I will," Elliot replied, surprised to find he actually meant it. The remainder of the week passed in a blur of subtle but significant changes. Teachers who had previously overlooked him began calling on him in class, discovering that the quiet new student had a sharp mind and thoughtful insights. Students who had once parted around him in the hallways like water around a stone now nodded in greeting or stopped to chat. On Thursday afternoon, Elliot made his way to the library, where he found Sophia and 4 other students gathered around, a large table covered in textbooks and notebooks. They welcomed him without fanfare, simply making space as if he'd always been part of their group. As they worked through physics problems and debated historical interpretations, Elliot felt something unfamiliar taking root, a sense of belonging, of stability. For the first time, the prospect of eventually moving to a new town didn't fill him with dread, but with something closer to regret. Friday brought Damon's return from suspension, and the hallways buzzed with speculation about how he would react to his altered social standing. Elliot, arriving early for his first class, was organizing his notebook when a hush fell over the room. Looking up, he found Damon standing in the doorway, his usual swagger noticeably diminished. Their eyes met across the classroom, a moment of silent acknowledgement passing between them. Then Damon nodded curtly and took a seat on the opposite side of the room. It wasn't an apology, Elliot hadn't expected one, but it was acceptance of a new reality. The hierarchy had shifted, not through violence or humiliation, but through the simple demonstration of skill and restraint. After school, Elliot found his grandfather waiting in their modest sedan, as he did every Friday. Yeye, with his close-cropped silver hair and alert eyes that missed nothing, studied his grandson's face as he slid into the passenger seat. "You seem different today," he observed in Cantonese, pulling away from the curb. "Something has changed." Elliot considered how to explain the events of the past week. "I had to use what you taught me," he finally said. Yeye nodded, unsurprised. Against bullies? Yes. Did you hurt them? No, Elliot said. I controlled the situation, like you showed me. A smile creased his grandfather's weathered face. Good. Control of self before control of others. This is the way. He glanced at Elliot. And now, how do they treat you? Differently, Elliot admitted. With respect, I think. Some want me to teach them. This drew a raised eyebrow from Ye. Here, and will you? I showed Tyler some basic stances and blocks, Elliot said, but I told him real mastery takes years of practice. As it took you, his grandfather agreed. But teaching is also learning. Perhaps this is good for you. They drove in comfortable silence for a while before Elliot spoke again. Yeah, I know we'll probably move again soon, but what, grandson? I think I could be happy here. Elliot finished quietly. I've made some friends. Real ones, I think. Yaya considered this as they stopped at a red light. I have been offered a position at the community college, he said thoughtfully, teaching Wing Chun and Tai Chi 3 days a week. The pay is not as good as private students, but it would be steady. Elliot turned to him in surprise. You mean we could stay? If that is what you want, his grandfather said. You have moved enough in your young life. Perhaps it is time to put down roots. The light changed, and they continued driving, but something fundamental had shifted in Elliot's world. He thought of the study group at the library, of Sophia's easy conversation, of Tyler's earnest efforts to learn basic forms, and even of Damon's grudging respect. For 3 years since losing his parents, Elliot had been adrift, never allowing himself to fully invest in any school or friendship, knowing another move was inevitable. He had hidden his abilities, kept his head down, tried to be invisible, all in an effort to avoid the pain of attachment followed by loss. But invisibility had its own cost. In trying to avoid becoming a target, he had denied himself the chance to be seen, truly seen for who he was. On Monday morning, Elliot walked through the doors of Westridge High with his shoulders back and his head up. In the crowded hallway, he spotted Sophia chatting with friends and raised a hand in greeting. She smiled and waved him over, making space in their circle. As he joined them, laughing at a shared joke, Elliot realized that his grandfather's greatest lesson hadn't been about martial arts at all. It had been about finding the courage to be visible, to take up space in the world, to risk connection even knowing that loss might follow. For the first time in years, Westridge didn't feel like just another temporary stop. It felt like a beginning. Well, now I want to know, what's your opinion about this story? Leave a comment, we'd love to hear from you, and tell us which city you watched this video from. And it's not over yet. There's another powerful story playing on your screen right now. Click on it. I'm waiting for you.